Hi, welcome to Dig Into China. I'm Dong Shang. Today, I'd like to share with you a highly popular article in China. Specifically, it is a research paper that has been widely disseminated and discussed. The author is Feng, an associate professor at the School of Political Science and Public Administration at Wuhan University. Professor Feng, an expert in local governance and a doctoral advisor, wrote this research report. The title of this article is "The Overextension of Credibility in Local Governance Has Become the Norm." Feng specializes in researching rural society and grassroots governance, conducting extensive field work at the local level. In his studies, he discovered that the trust crisis in China's local governance has spread down to the village level. County governments have lost credibility with banks, enterprises, and township governments. This loss of trust trickles down as township governments lose credibility with township officials, village officials, and construction companies. Subsequently, village officials lose the trust of construction crews and villagers, leading to a broader loss of trust in grassroots officials among the villagers. Let's delve into this to see how this professional research paper addresses the overextension of credibility in local governance. Professor Feng's paper is notably strong in theory and logic, providing a much more convincing perspective than the broader discussion by ordinary critics. His paper starts with this description. Currently, a systemic spread of various rogue-like behaviors is evident in local governance. As ecosystem aptly labeled as governance through credit overextension appears to have become widespread. Amidst the widespread urbanization drives that surpass the financial capabilities of local governments and the allocation of national public fiscal resources to rural areas through project-based funding, leading to new forms of village-level debt, there is a pervasive state of credit overextension. This extends not only between government and business entities, but also between governments and banks, various levels of governance bodies, and even between grassroots officials and the populace. The systemic prevalence of credit overextension across different facets of grassroots governance is tearing apart the foundational trust system essential for maintaining social order. The increasing rogue-like conduct among entities involved in social governance poses a significant threat to public regulations, eroding the potential forces driving effective governance such as moral leadership, legal framework, and community self-governance. Consequently, this drifts social governance further away from modernization in both its structural systems and operational capacities. Professor Feng's initial illustration of credit overextension involves the interaction between county governments and banks. The article notes that according to regulations, local governments are not permitted to borrow directly. To circumvent this restriction, many local governments establish state-owned enterprises such as urban development groups or municipal investment companies, which then borrow funds from banks on behalf of the government. This enables them to address the significant funding gaps present in county-level development projects. One notable expression of county government's financial overextension is the practice of paying only interest without repaying the principal. During a survey conducted in County S, Guizhou Province, the main reason for local indebtedness was attributed to extensive public infrastructure projects, such as large squares, which generally do not yield profits. What motivates this debt-fueled construction? The county mayor explained that it primarily arises from the pressure to achieve political success. If other counties are engaging in such projects, failure to do so would result in being left behind. Moreover, county officials focus on short-term achievements without considering future implications. Despite the relatively stable local financial situation with no delays in civil servant salaries, the local land revenue stands at only 100 million yuan, while the debt amounts to 8 billion yuan, with an annual interest payment of 100 to 200 million yuan. The county mayor candidly admit that repaying the debt is impossible and that the banks can only expect to receive interest. Otherwise, they risk receiving nothing at all. Another way county governments overextend their credit is by artificially inflating state-owned assets, and Professor Feng offers an intriguing example to illustrate this phenomenon. For example, according to the auction document for the 20-year franchise of the funeral home in Rongjiang County, on August 5, 2022, the Civil Affairs Bureau of Rongjiang County auctioned the 20-year franchise of the funeral home with both the starting bid and the final transaction price set at 127 million yuan. The transferor is a company established by the Civil Affairs Bureau of Rongjiang County to manage the funeral home, with the County Civil Affairs Bureau holding 100% of the shares. The winning bidder, the buyer, is Rongsheng State-Owned Capital Operation Corporation, a company fully owned by the County Finance Bureau. The funeral home is an operational state-owned asset, and the transfer funds generated from the auction become non-tax revenue for the county finance. Rongjiang County orchestrated this transaction, allowing financial funds to circulate from the left pocket of the Finance Bureau to the right, creating a circular flow of auction funds. This not only artificially inflates the county's financial revenue by 127 million yuan, but also significantly enhanced the assets of Rongsheng State-Owned Capital Operation Corporation, making its financial position appear stronger, which facilitates further financing and potentially deceiving banks into lending more money. In the second dimension of credit overextension, Professor Feng illustrates in his paper an instance from a county in Henan province where credit overextension occurs between county and the township governments. During research conducted in County Q, Henan province, it was revealed that the county government had initially promised each township a compensation of 100,000 yuan for every acre of reclaimed residential land inspected. Encouraged by this policy incentive, townships actively engaged in the process of farmers withdrawing from residential land. For instance, in S Township, for every acre of residential land withdrawn, the township received 92,000 yuan in compensation from the County Finance Bureau and the Natural Resources Bureau. Over several years, if S Township withdrew over 1,000 acres of residential land, it could accumulate nearly 100 million yuan in land compensation from the county level. However, when the county level finances tightened, the county government, to maintain operations, resorted to desperate measures, including diverting earmarked funds from the central governments. By the end of 2023, the county government still owed S Township 20 million yuan in compensation. In such circumstances, how could the township government trust the county government? This situation underscores the overextension of credit between county and the township governments. In the third aspect of credit overextension, township governments are not exempt. Credit overextension arises between township governments and township officials, with county governments exercising authoritative control over township finances. The budgetary constraints of township becomes stringent. A substantial portion of transfer payments earmarked for public services is centrally allocated by the county, leading to township governments losing their fundamental authority to allocate budget expenditures. Faced with financial shortfalls, township governments are compelled to overextend credit with township officials, leading to delayed payments to local employees. Holding back salaries effectively transforms the wages of administrative personnel into a resource utilized to fill the fiscal shortfalls. If the county government deceives us, then we deceive the township's civil servants. In several central and western townships, government employees commonly voice grievance about both low salaries and the lack of job security, with frequent occurrences of delayed wages and withheld bonuses. One township civil servant recently complained that shortly after beginning work, all townships in the county ceased dispersing performance-based subsidies and field work allowances. With the suspension of performance-based payments, township officials now receive monthly salaries of less than 3,000 yuan. This credit overextension by township governments towards their officials has prompted most young officials to opt to escape from the township, while those approaching or exceeding 35 years of age are forced into an early retirement state known as lying flat. The fourth dimension of credit overextension occurs between grassroots officials of township governments and construction companies. It's not limited to mutual deception and overextension of credit within the institutional systems, but also extends to these officials' interactions with construction companies. This type of credit overextension involves either refusing to acknowledge debts or defaulting on payments. Project-based supply is a common approach to county-level developments. This model requires local governance bodies to provide matching funds and often mandates build first, reimburse later procedures and reward-based funding. In other words, construction must start before completing formalities, and the funding is dispersed only after the project is completed and passes inspection. This approach allows local governance bodies to break down large projects into smaller segments, giving them the flexibility to choose contractors and profit from the difference between the allocated project funds and actual construction costs. This difference becomes a discretionary resource for the local governance bodies, creating opportunities for collusion with construction companies and businesses. To ensure projects proceed smoothly, local governance bodies often build good relationships with contractors and entrepreneurs, personally assuring them that if they begin construction before project funds are released, they will not only receive their payments but also profit and secure more opportunities for future projects. Village projects often involve significant financial maneuvering, allowing funds to be reallocated between different projects, creating considerable flexibility. In particular, infrastructure projects can be highly profitable, with district officials noting that the profit margins can sometimes reach up to 50%. Village officials typically sign contracts with contractors under their own names, as contractors are hesitant to enter agreements directly with the village. Contractors are aware that working for the village or government often means long delays in payments and a difficulty in finding responsible parties. By signing with individual village officials, contractors have specific creditors they can approach. The contractors involved are usually local construction business owners who have close relationships with the village officials. These officials negotiate and persuade the contractors to take on the projects. As a result, these village-level debts are essentially private debts, although they are incurred for the benefits of the village collective. However, if project funds that are supposed to be disbursed on time are delayed or fail to cover the construction costs, even projects signed privately by village officials can result in defaults. To address these shortfalls, officials might use funds from new projects to cover previous gaps, forcing them to continuously apply for new projects, grants, and subsidies, and sometimes even default on payments. The fifth aspect of credit overextension occurs between village officials and the public. This issue has been hinted at in previous examples, ultimately highlighting the broader problems of the government overextending credit with its citizens. This overextension is evident in the increasing frequency of reneging incidents in rural areas. Professor Feng illustrated a case from a village in Hubei province. In this scenario, the village secretary convened a meeting with the villagers to discuss the construction of a road and gather their input. Nearly all villagers expressed support for the project, even agreeing to the use of their leased lands without compensation. This agreement stemmed from the secretary's repeated emphasis that the road construction was a communal endeavor beneficial to all. However, when it came time to start occupying land for road constructions, the previously united consensus began to crumble. Some villagers who had initially expressed support now prevented construction crews from accessing their leased land, demonstrating active non-cooperation. Villagers complained that despite agreements made during the meeting, some individuals acted differently afterward. Some even engaged in covert actions, attempting to expand the area of their storage rooms and so forth. Villagers attribute this increasing trend of reneging to the lack of credibility among grassroots officials and the local governments. Now here are my takeaways. Firstly, it's noteworthy that the credit overextension and the trust deficit have become commonplace in present-day China. The fact that experts, scholars, and professors are now recognizing, studying, and defining these phenomena holds great significance. In the current Chinese context, there is a general sentiment that the governance model championed internationally by Xi Jinping and the CCP may not be as effective in practice as portrayed. This raises the question, is this governance model progressively improving or worsening? Politically, there is a common belief that Xi Jinping is rolling back progress, but few delve into how this regression occurs at the institutional level. Is it solely due to Xi Jinping's rhetoric from the presidential podium? His speeches have already influenced the entire governance system in China. While Xi Jinping may have significant power in Beijing with the ability to retract the statements at will, this behavior translates into systematic denial and credit overextension when observed at the lower levels of the hierarchy. Professor Feng's notable aspect lies in his exceptional approach. Rather than merely expressing dismay over recurring issues such as governmental debt defaults or the use of criminal penalties to settle debts, he elevates these phenomena to a theoretical level. He posits that this credit overextension governance style has become commonplace, something that the people have grown accustomed to. This is the most striking aspect of his article. Secondly, this governance approach was initially championed by Xi Jinping as a proud model for global dissemination. However, in the everyday reality of China, it has emerged as a major drawback, palpable to ordinary citizens. The significant disparity between Xi Jinping's proclaimed governance style and objectives and the lived experience of people in China raises a deeper question. Are Xi Jinping's governance methods and objectives truly congruent with those of the Chinese Communist Party and the various levels of government in practice? Indeed, Xi Jinping has not advocated for various levels of government to deceive or swindle. Such statements have not been made by him. The governance approach envisioned by Xi Jinping differs from the prevalent approach in contemporary Chinese society, exhibiting both similarities and differences. The commonality here is that Xi Jinping's governance centers around the notion of "I have the final say." Similarly, the flawed governance highlighted in Professor Feng's paper, characterized by credit overextension, also adheres to the principle of "I have the final say and I default if I choose to." It's evident that those with the most authority are the first to default. Provincial governments default on county governments default on township governments default on villages, and the villages default on villagers. Hence, the underlying principle of this credit overextension and defaulting is "I have the final say, my word is law," which mirrors Xi Jinping's governance style. This serves as a point of convergence between the two. The difference lies in the interests at play. Xi Jinping pursues his agenda aiming to uphold his authoritarian rule and perpetuate his lifelong tenure. Meanwhile, local officials prioritize maintaining their authority and perpetuating layers of corruption. You see, this supposed credit overextension conceals the harsh reality of various interest groups carving up the nation and devouring its public resources. Whether it's county governments overextending credit with banks, county governments extending credit to township governments, or township governments extending credit to villagers, at every level of this chain, corruption is rampant and unavoidable. At each step, corruption is intertwined with this process. Without corruption, the prevalence of so-called credit overextension wouldn't exist. Thus, corruption has become an inherent aspect of contemporary local governance. You might find this conclusion somewhat disagreeable. After all, hasn't Xi Jinping consistently stressed the importance of anti-corruption measures? Doesn't combating corruption lead to a cleaner system? Not necessarily. Professor Feng's investigative report illustrates that credit overextension has become commonplace, fueled by the essence and the motivation of corruption. Without the corruption, maintaining such a norm of credit overextension would be impossible. Therefore, when we reconsider Xi Jinping's governance approach, the purported anti-corruption efforts seem nothing but a farce. The normalization of credit overextension in governance is the true indicator of Xi Jinping's governance of the nation today, reflecting the genuine state of governance under the CCP. Thank you for watching. Please like, leave a comment, and subscribe to my channel. Just click the subscribe button right here. I'll see you again shortly. Until then,